As someone who enjoys watching reviews and deconstructions of entertainment, as well as from personal experience, I've heard a lot about how modern Hollywood is uninspired and soulless. How instead of creating new, powerful stories, Hollywood falls back on and abuses existing intellectual property, milking it for all it's worth and running it into the ground. And well, I largely agree. However, as I was watching the first 10 episodes of the Phineas and Ferb reboot, something was sparked in me. Why do we have so many sequels and remakes? I've had the thought before, but simply dismissed it as sloth, greed, pride, gluttony. Well, not really. And well, not the remaining deadly sins either. But you get my point. This time, however, I had a different thought. I'm both a writer and enjoy philosophy. Therefore, I, of all people, should know that there's always more to the story. As such, this is my attempt to steal a Hollywood executive's shoes and walk a mile in them in order to steelman the current state of affairs. In other words, this is the argument in favor of cash grab remakes. I began thinking about sequels, reboots, and remakes as Phineas and Ferb Season 5 drew near, and so as it landed on Disney+, I watched it and came away thinking that sequels, reboots, and remakes can provide incredible expansions to the world and characters within the story. The dynamic demonstrating this that stood out the strongest to me was set up in Season 4's Happy Birthday Isabella, when Stacy learns of Perry's secret identity. The audience was reminded of Stacy's knowledge in the Aurora Perry Alice, when Stacy is given the responsibility to watch over Perry while the Flynn Fletcher family is going on a cruise. This resulted in my favorite moment of the season. Perry the Platypus having the opportunity to be himself around those he knows and loves. There have been somewhat similar moments between Perry and Doofenshmirtz, but seeing Perry be able to sit down and play video games with Stacy was iconic. The dynamic continued to evolve in Agent T for Teen, when Stacy steps in, much like Carl in Undercover Carl, steps into the role of secret agent and saves Perry from danger. Without a reboot,
this is not a reboot, it's a revival!
Sorry, revival. We never would have seen this relationship evolve, and having seen it now, I feel that without this revival, we would have missed out on something. For my second point, I turn to Dune Parts 1 and 2. Sequels, reboots, and remakes can leave audiences with a better product. While I haven't yet watched the earlier attempts at turning Dune into a film, I know that we would have missed something without the recent releases. The stunning visuals, fantastic soundtrack, and phenomenal acting left me in awe when both of these films came to a close. I'll repeat myself and say, without this reboot, we would have missed out on something. CGI and film editing have reached a remarkable level of intricacy and beauty. There were times while watching Dune that I forgot sandworms aren't real. Something that, despite great visuals and effects, I didn't think while watching E.T. But modern CGI allows for cities, creatures, caverns, and chaos that never have existed to encase an audience in the story. Modern technological developments allowing for worlds to be created in ways they never have before allows me to raise my hands and accept remakes, reboots, and sequels. And here comes the point I needed these shoes for. Money. Look, plenty of people have praised the Dune reboots because it was a great piece of art. There have been great expansions to worlds and characters. It's often why sequels exist in the first place. The biggest factor in why these stories are made, however, is money. Executives are in a role where they think money. Money is important for a few reasons. Big reasons. The biggest, if you don't have money, you can't make a film. At least not one to the scale Hollywood studios produce. When making a film, studios are risking millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Reboots and remakes and sequels are the safe bet. And when it is your job, as it is corporate executives, to make enough money to continue to employ, in Universal's case, tens of thousands, and in Disney's case, hundreds of thousands, just to name a few studios. Without the money that some of these reboots and remakes bring in, every single movie would be anything from a well-educated guess to a shot in the dark. Another point is that film and entertainment are facing a ridiculously uncertain future. From the boom of social media, to the rise of streaming, to the uncertainty regarding AI, what does the future hold? Will social media use increase compared to the time spent watching film? Do a critical mass of people prefer watching other people stream video games? What on earth does the rise of streaming, Netflix, Disney+, Paramount+, Hulu, mean for film profits? And what on earth does AI mean? I heard a point recently that kind of blew my mind when I heard it put in this way. Netflix, the giant of streaming, is grasping at the rights to produce already existing IP from successful independent projects on YouTube, such as Cocomelon, Odd Ones Out, The Amazing Digital Circus, and more. If Netflix is that desperate to bring eyes from YouTube to them, how does Hollywood continue? I don't know. You don't know. Hollywood executives don't know. In a situation like that, where, as mentioned, an executive is responsible for thousands of jobs, I don't know if I would be willing to take massive risks. Finally, the money that remakes rake in means audiences want it, and it's the executive's job to give audiences what they want, and audiences vote with their dollars. Looking at the top 10 of each year since 2020, notice how many are sequels, live-action remakes, or in the MCU or DCEU. Notice how many of the ones that aren't those are other adaptations of intellectual property. Nearly 3/4 of the top 10 are sequels, remakes, or a continuation of a cinematic universe. It increases to over 9 in 10 if you include films based on existing IP. I heard someone else say in a panel that, as a writer, you're going to spend most of your career adapting. Adaptation, remakes, and sequels and reboots are just where the industry is at. And the reason for that is not as simple as there's just a lack of creativity. Instead, audiences are less and less willing to see a random new film when there's near infinite and tailored content for them online. Look, money is the driving factor for any business. It's quite literally the job of the top levels to make sure a company's money is in order and not take unnecessary risks. And in a rough industry like entertainment, every single film is a risk. Just look at how many, even in the top 10, flopped. Enter nuance. Nuance. Now that I'm done steel manning, internet interrupts nuance. Internet. Coward. Other internet. So you didn't mean it? Other internet. How dare you! All joking aside, now that I've finished steel manning the current state of Hollywood, let me clarify my personal opinion on the matter. And I think there may be no better film to do this with than How to Train Your Dragon 2025. To put it bluntly, this film was not necessary and added nothing to the world. There was some incredible CGI, and a few moments that, with a critical eye, you could tell were an actor interacting with something that isn't there. Live action can't ever be as precise and intentional as animation. Continuing on a critical note, I kind of missed the cartoon dragons. I didn't need this remake, I didn't ask for it, and I enjoyed the experience. Most of the parts I enjoyed were in the original, but that doesn't take away from my enjoyment. There are things that the live action did better and parts it did slightly worse. But the big question, do I regret seeing the remake of How to Train Your Dragon? No, but at the end of the day, I also didn't need to. So, where do I come down on cash grab remakes? Well, there's going to be a lot more. And look, it's quite possible that a lot of it will be soulless slop, solely made for a profit. I will also say, modern prices to create films are ridiculous and are a problem that leads to further and further creative cowardice by executives. When so many $400 million films are flopping, it is clearly a problem which needs to be solved. The biggest punch I can dole out, however, has nothing to do with money. I simply don't believe that many sequels, remakes, reboots add a ton. For example, even with the Stacey Perry dynamic, if Phineas and Ferb had never gotten continued and I'd never seen it, oh well, I'd have been fine. I also believe that each remake, reboot, or sequel opens the door to failure. One of the episodes I was most excited for in Phineas and Ferb ended up disappointing me. A disappointment that I never would have had if it, well, hadn't ever been made. But at the end of the day, when remakes, reboots,
Revival!
and sequels are made with love and craft, even when the ultimate reason is money, I'm glad to have them here.